Hi cake fam, welcome to another video of me making a cake for you on the camera. Today we're going to be doing a different view of getting our edible images onto fondant for the top of a cake. I've got some Hello Kitty images that I've just already cut out using my Loyal scalpel craft knife just here. Going around, I've left a white border around. That's just sort of the style that I like to do. I've also got a few love hearts. I haven't left the white border around there. Something different. Anyway, so I thought I would show you this view, bird's eye view of doing that. So I am a Sat Nice girly. I use their gum paste. I do find that it is sort of the right consistency for me. Some of the other brands are a little bit greasy, I find. So this is the brand that I go for. It is getting increasingly harder to find in Australia because it is imported. It's an American product. So anyway, I use it where I can. Now, making sure that my hands are mega clean. You can see that I've got just a little bit of blue going on. I have scrubbed my hands, trust me. Like obviously my hands are always clean, but making sure that you don't have any residue on there. I have scrubbed these clean. I just did the same thing using edible images, but with a stitch cake. So the ink was very blue and I ended up with blue all over my fingers. So I have scrubbed them and there should be no transfer, but so excuse my fingertips. I want to keep my fingers clean as possible because there is a lot of white going on. So if I still had that blue transfer, it would be sort of transferring onto that white. So hopefully that doesn't happen because I have scrubbed my fingers. Anyway, now I'm just rolling out the gum paste. And I want it to be still quite thick. I don't want it to be paper thin or anything because I want to be able to shove a toothpick in the bottom of it so that we can have the Hello Kitty standing up on the top of the cake. Now, once we are putting these in the oven, they should. I don't say that anymore. They will, because this method is now foolproof because I've done it a couple of times. The fondant will harden and it will be able to stand up by itself. So this will happen in a matter of 10 minutes instead of 48 hours letting it dry, air dry. So, oops, I'm reasonably thick here still. And I'm just using a really thick flat brush, so just a Sweet Sticks, I think this is number 5 brush. And just a real little bit of water. Sorry, I should have done that on the camera if you can see. So I want my brush just to be damp but not dripping wet or anything. And hopefully this is going to give you an idea of where I'm at with the water. So I can see with the light reflection where the fondant is dry and where the fondant is wet, and hopefully you can too, because I want the whole surface of the fondant to have moisture on it. I don't want it to be wet. I don't want to paint it on. I just want this to get a little bit tacky and I don't want any dry bits. So I'm using the light to sort of see if there's any dry bits. So it's just sort of tacky. I'm not going to touch it because I need my hands to be very dry. Now, popping these images straight on. What's the best way to do this? It's always Tetris with this sort of stuff. All right, and I want my fingers to be super, super dry. I don't want to touch this fondant that's wet, or else I'm going to make my ink bleed, and I definitely do not want that. Is she gonna fit in there? No. Yes, no, maybe. Now, obviously this is, yeah, there we go. Just need them just to be fondant underneath the biggest bits of the, like I'm not really too worried about this at the edge here. If you can see it, there's no fondant there, which is totally fine for me. just as long as I've got a good base of fondant under each area. All right, now I'm just going to scalpel around, just cutting a little bit of excess off. I don't want to go around and cut around the image just yet. I'm actually going to do that after the oven, because you can see, if you have a look here, I'm cutting this way and the fondant is just moving underneath the image. So I don't want to start getting really precise around the images while the fondant is still really pliable, because it's just going to not work out. So cutting off some excess. Now these two images, one of them is going to go on the top of the cake. I haven't decided which one yet. I'll be honest, I did print these a little bit bigger than I really needed, so I'm worried that this is going to be huge and too big for the top of the cake, but I still want the option to put it on the top of the cake. This one's a bit smaller, so maybe that's an option, but I'm going to leave myself open to having both options just in case. Better safe than sorry. So in saying that, I am cutting the bottom off of the top, the two that might go on the top, and I'm going to put toothpicks in the bottom. So I'm making sure that the toothpicks are going straight into the fondant and not popping out the top of the image. I have absolutely made that mistake before and ended up with a hole and a tear in the image. Not fun, especially when you don't have backups. So pushing the fondant, the toothpick into the fondant rather than the image. Now, if you had, for example, a longer image, something tall, you might even shove a skewer into it just to give it a bit more stability. This one's quite fat and round, so I'm happy with the fact that it's like sort of, its stability is sort of dispersed evenly. But if you had something like big and then it went like, you know, a body and then a head or something, you might even shove a skewer in the from the tops, just so that it's got some security around that thin neck part. I might actually show you what I did with Stitch. That's that. So I'm literally just putting them onto a baking tray like this, making sure that they're flat. I don't want this to go up the sides. So that's flat. And I'm going to pop that into the oven at about 50, like the keep warm setting, so about 50 degrees. And I'm going to leave it in there for about 10 minutes. The fondant will feel like it's sort of melted and very soft. But as soon as you pull it out the oven and it starts to dry and cool down, it will actually become really, really solid and super, super structurally sound. So I'm going to go and do that, and I'll show you the stitch thing as well so that you can get an idea of what I'm talking about, and we'll come back. All right, so these are some images that I did earlier on. This is how they come out of the oven. So if you can hear that, it's rock solid, like it's not going anywhere. I use my scalpel just to like sort of cut around, and I'll show you with the Hello Kitty ones once we're finished. Cut around the fondant, just as an example. Right, so it's sort of on an angle heading away from the image. And so I would go around and cut all that. So that one's pretty stable. This one is going to go on the top of the cake. So I've got some toothpicks on the top there. His ears, obviously there's only like a really small piece of fondant holding those together, right? So they could just snap off. Before I put them in the oven, I actually put a toothpick in here and then also through here so that these ears, they're not going anywhere. When I took it out of the oven, it was fine. Like it will dry secure, but I was just worried about the neck being quite thin. So I also shoved a toothpick just straight through here so that this is also secure and it's not going anywhere. So that's going to go on the top of the cake. It's not going to go anywhere. It's also dry enough to then put in the fridge and it won't sort of go sticky and condensate-y, if that makes sense. So that's my method for doing that. But we'll continue on with the Hello Kitty ones when they come out of the oven. All right, I'm just going to also do a few of those love hearts that we saw as well. These ones I'm not too fussed whether they are mega hard or not, because they're not going to be going on to the cake and have to be standing on their own. They're kind of going to be stuck around the cake, but I still want to put them onto fondant. So the reason that I do this, and a funny story you've probably heard in my waffles, that I actually put an edible image around a cake. It was like a cake wrap, and I put it straight into buttercream. And by the time I had given it to the client, it started to rip and tear and go all sweaty and gross, and it was not a good time. And so ever since then, I have vowed never to put an edible image directly onto buttercream ever again. So anything that needs to go just straight onto the cake, it's getting a layer of fondant in between it. So these love hearts could just go straight onto the buttercream, but I don't want them to start rippling and absorbing the moisture from the buttercream. So they are 100% going onto fondant. But in saying that, right, this love heart, it just needs a little backing like this, just for the image to have something to separate it from the buttercream. I don't mind that it looks like that. That's going to have buttercream on it, and this is not, so that's enough for me, really, to be honest. I wonder if these small ones, are they going to be a bit big? I can probably trim those anyway. This is just a quicker way. To get the shape of the love heart instead of trimming around. And then these are going to go in the oven too, and then they're just ready to be placed on the cake. I don't have to worry about them. So some pink ones to go with our Hello Kitty. And some red. Pink and red. And these will go in the oven, same thing. They'll be dry, ready to use on the cake. Oop. All right, pop those in the oven. All right, I've just pulled these out of the oven, and you can see I can hardly pull this off. It's really quite, what's the word? It's like a melted caramel, and I can feel it. It's just so soft. So leaving these to dry, I might even just move them onto a cooler surface. It's still a bit warm. Ooh. Now, my advice actually would just be to leave them on the tray and let them dry on their own. But since I'm impatient. So letting these dry completely, cool completely, I should say cool, not dry. And they will start to become very stiff and hard, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to give that about 20 minutes, let them dry, cool, let them cool, and then we'll come back and cut them together. All right. Let me just turn that music off so that I don't get copyrighted on YouTube. There we go. Hopefully that's better. Now, I've left these for 20 minutes. They are easy to handle now. They're super They're probably a little bit soft. I could have left them a little bit longer, but for the sake of the video, I can now pick them up super easy and they're not all sloppy and sog like before. So using my craft knife spatula, I'm going around, and now you can see that the fondant doesn't move because it's stiff behind the image, right? So it just pulls away like that. Okay, I'm going to go around the whole thing. Now I'm angling my spatula sort of on an angle towards like the bottom edge towards the image. So it's sort of cutting on an angle, if that makes sense. So I want to not be able to see the fondant behind the image. So sort of cutting into the back behind the image. All right. So like that, sort of like a beveled edge, if you can see. So it's sort of going that way so that at the front you can't see any of the fondant. So hopefully, oh, see, can you see that? It's because I was playing with Stitch. I'll see if I can fix that later or else. Yeah, anyway, just ignore that happened. Welcome to my life. If you want to watch some more train wrecks, have a look at the rest of my videos. But this is the way that I do my images. So hopefully that helped a little bit. Just a foolproof method to some peace of mind when it comes to sugar paper images. And a little method into getting them dry without waiting 48 hours. If you do want to see how this cake turns out, you can, I'll link the video in the notes, the Hello Kitty cake, and you can watch these little toppers in action. Thanks for watching.